Okay, just need a second to prepare some stuff. And then I can start. Then. I will need to call the trainee, and then we can go ahead with all the stuff that's needed. Okay, I also need to add the link, and that will be it. Okay, I also need to bump something, and it should work. So let's call him. Hello?
Hello?
Okay, can you hear me?
Does the sound good?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, it's perfectly fine. So, first thing first, I will add you on... I will send the spectate request on Steam.
Uh-huh.
And, well, obviously for the beginning, my English isn't perfect, so if there's something you don't understand or want me to repeat, just feel free to do so. And I will try to do it in other words or something.
The same here, English is not my first language, so...
Okay, so I sent you the request on Steam and just waiting.
I approved. Approved.
Okay, so it's probably still just connecting.
Okay.
Okay, it's loading for me right now.
Okay.
Okay, so for the beginning, because there are some questions that I want to ask before we go to your questions that you sent and stuff. So, what rank are you now, and how long are you playing the game?
I've picked the game around beginning of September. It's like a month ago, I suppose. So, Starforge Legends is the only expansion that was released after I picked up the game. Yeah, and what was the other question?
What is your rank right now on ladder?
My rank, it's A0, I believe.
Okay.
So I've been playing Blood exclusively, as I've stated, since I have no idea about like deck building. So just through a guide on Game Press, I've built this aggro blood deck like a few weeks ago, and I've been just rolling with that. So the game, I've been learning how the cards work through my opponent's plays, yeah, but basically I'm just playing one deck at the moment, so I wanted to kind of expand my knowledge of the game and how the to learn how the deck building works, because currently I have no clue basically. I do refer to some guides and stuff. I watched some videos on YouTube, but they kind of give like general recommendations on deck building, and that's just it. And I still have no idea. Am I supposed to put in effort consciously to learn that, or is it just something that comes with experience? And it's basically just about playing different classes, playing different type of decks and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Okay, sure. So I guess that's totally fine, and I also got your questions, like the one that you sent me. But for starters, I can answer the question about the deck building, because that's one of the most common things that people ask for in a lot of card games. And well, first thing first, did you play any other card games before Shadowverse, or is it your first one?
It's my first one.
Okay, it's your first one. So in card games, well, it's also common. Well, I can compare it to other games. What other games did you play?
Well, I've played mostly like RPGs, I guess. JRPGs, some of them. That kind of stuff.
Okay. So for this genre, it will be hard to compare. But are they, I don't know, online ones where you compete with others, or it's offline where it's solo mode?
In terms of competitive games, I've played Overwatch. I've played some Call of Duty, but those are like first-person shooters. I think they're even less relevant here.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So our RPGs are just single player. I've played.
Okay, so if it's single player, then the comparison will not work because it's different when competing with others. But well, I will just try to explain it only based on Shadowverse. So the thing with a lot of card games is, that depends on your goal. So if your goal is to just play cards and have fun, then it's okay to build your own decks. But if you're aiming to be even a little competitive or just win a lot of games, because I suppose right now with your rank, you just want to win games, even though you're only playing with blood. If you expand to other classes, you have to focus on winning because, well, losing sucks most of the time. And with deck building, it goes like this. Unless someone got extensive knowledge of entire game, so all of the cards, all of the metagame experience with how the game works, how the mechanic works, everything, it is totally not recommended to build your own decks. And the reason is very simple. If you don't know all of these things, you will simply mess it up and it will not work. So it's totally fine to net deck decks from other people, to just look for the tournaments, for the ladder players who have success with such decks, because then you are guaranteed that you will copy and paste a deck that will work. Like, you are sure that that deck has had some achievements, and obviously the player piloting the deck had some skill, so it doesn't mean that the moment you copy the deck you will be great, but you are sure that your deck building process won't be messed up. So it will be a fine piece of artwork, and you can just play and learn how to play a good deck. Because if you build your own deck, it doesn't necessarily mean it will be good, and most of the time, if you are beginning with a game, it won't be good. That because you have to really play a lot of games, and at best play a lot of card games, so different genres. For example, if you only play one card game, that's also fine, but you have to master it. But if you play a lot of similar card games, then you are learning through every one of them. Because most of the tempo-based card games right now we can throw in Hearthstone, Shadowverse, Duelist to some extent, Elder Scrolls Legends, Magic the Gathering. All of them have the very same basis about getting the play points, getting mana every turn, or playing them in Magic the Gathering, but that's a physical card game, so that's different. Playing your spells, playing your creatures, and attacking your opponent. And obviously every one of these games will have its own rules, so there will be different rules, different keywords, different creatures, different spells and stuff, but the assumptions are the same. So by playing every one of them, if you, for example, play game A and then go to the game B, which have the very same goal but with use of different cards, it will be way easier to transition and see the comparisons, see the similarities, and if something will work in game A, it should work in game B. That's why in all of these card games you have archetypes, so aggro, mid-range, control, combo. It's all common for all of these games. Well, that's because they have the similar goals. Aggro, play your creatures, go phase, do some burn spells. Mid-range, play efficient creatures, play some ramp, and be fine. Control, play a lot of removals, take control of the board, and then finish the game. Combo, try to combo off and kill your opponent with some sort of either spell combination or creature combination. and it's the very same. And the only difference is how you do it. So which cards are you gonna use, which mechanics are you gonna use, so let's go for it. So when it comes to deck building, like for just for the end to end this one, just don't build your own decks unless you are experienced. So sure, you are free to test, you are free to build your own decks. No one is telling you to not do it. But just don't be surprised if the results won't be great. So if you aim to win, it's way safer to just net deck. Sure, some people will call it, well, oh, you are net decking, blah, 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 and a lot of people on the forums, Reddits and such are trash talking, but that's pointless. The other reason why it's pointless is not every good player will be a good deck builder, but every good deck builder will be a good player. And that's the trends that you can notice. A lot of players in higher ranks simply copy from each other. It's not like we have, 50,000 masters, something like that, maybe even over 50,000 masters, and that doesn't mean that there is a 50,000 good deck builders. No, there is probably like maybe 1,000, maybe even less. And the rest will just copy the decks or try to change the decks that won the tournaments. So the trends are very simple. The tournament happened, the deck list gets released, people copy deck list from tournaments, change 1 or 2 cards, and that's it. They don't build their own deck from the scratch, and because the player base is so huge and cards are limited, so there is a limit to how many cards you have in expansions, and with every expansions obviously you are getting new cards. And the people who think the same, like, it depends on time, so it will take a lot of time, but assuming that two people won't meet each other, they won't look in the internet, and they are both great deck builders, eventually they will both find the very same build, because it's an element of getting to being optimal, like trying to fine-tune your deck list. So by trial and errors, they will just get the very same build in the end. So that's the basis for it. And comparing to RPGs, because I guess this time I can do it. When you have...
If it's relevant,
okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I just remembered, it completely slipped my mind. I've spent a lot of time back in high school playing Dota 2. Like, I've spent like hundreds of hours there. On Steam it says like about 1,500 hours, like 1,700 hours or something like that. So it's just like, it's kind of like a game that required a lot of knowledge about like how the game works, a lot of extensive knowledge to be like any good at it. So I don't know if it's relevant. It's just that it might be simpler for you to compare like Shadowverse or card games to MOBAs maybe than RPGs.
Yeah, so. It totally is. Dota is perfect when it comes to that, because if you play Dota, then I don't know what level of competitive were you playing at, but it doesn't matter. So in MOBA games, all in all, there will be some sort of meta game, and there will be some sort of item builds that will be preferred over the other. So there are like cookie cutter builds that new player can go into the game and look for the builds, and I should build this and this and this versus this and this hero, or in this and this situations. And it's not like, I will pick a random item and try how it works. No, okay, you can do it obviously, but most of the time people will just go to the internet and find the item builds that works, or strategies that works, or team comps that works, because team comp is also part of Dota after all. Same goes for League of Legends and such. And yeah, that's the same in card games. You just don't go and build your own team from the scratch in Dota unless you just know how to do it and what heroes will work with each other. So that's easier to compare to the deck building. So once again, just to close it off, you are free to experiment with your own decks, but if you aim to win, it's better to just copy from the others unless you gain a necessary experience. So when you will feel it. Like, you will know for yourself, like, if there is a moment where you need to ask the question, can I build my own decks? That means you are not ready. Like, you will be ready, you will know it by then. So that would close out this one. Okay, so I can go and check the ones that you send me. So first one, about the take-two mode, common trends, card with what properties primarily aim for. So all in all, the take-two mode changes with every expansion, so it's not the same because there will be new cards every time in take-two, and they will add the cards from new expansions. But the principle of drafting, so arenas, take-two, whatever, most of the card games have this mode, is very simple a lot of times. So you don't want conditional stuff. So you don't want to pick creatures that requires a lot of things to happen to win. You don't want stuff that requires a lot of setup. So for example, you played Blood. You know the card Vampiric Fortress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Arena, if you're present with Vampiric Fortress pick early on, it's better to not take it, because it requires you to get a creatures that will produce Forest Bats, because without Forest Bats, the Vampiric Fortress will never work, and you are not guaranteed that you will pick a creatures that will produce Forest Bat. I mean, you might be unlucky and do not get even single card that will produce them. And what are you gonna do then? You have one dead card that is laying in your deck. Obviously, if you already drafted like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, and it's your last pick, you are free to do so, but don't pick conditional cards at the very beginning. So that's the first thing about it. And again, removal is really important, so you should prioritize removal. So, to put it simple, there is this strategy in Magic the Gathering, they call it breadth, and it's because it indicates how you should draft. So breadth, first is B for bombs, then rare for removals, then there is E for evasion, but in Shadowverse we can translate this to ambush, for example, because it's a really nice mechanic. Also Shadowverse got Storm, so Storm is also a really good really good mechanic on Arena, because it allows you to attack your opponent's creatures without using your Evo points, and Evo points are really necessary. And then for the ending we have A, which doesn't exist in Shadowverse, and we have D, which is Dudes. So Dudes will be simply cards that, for example, 2 mana, 2 and 2 creature. That's it. Like, if it doesn't do anything else, you can pick it, because you will need your mana curve to be a lot of 2 drops, a lot of 3 drops, some 4 drops, some 5 drops, some 6 drops, and some 7+ drops. Not always, because you will be fine with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 most of the time. But if you have really good legendaries that cost more, then they go for the bomb category, and you should prioritize taking them over. Same goes for the gold cards. As for removal, for example, Dance of Death. Dance of Death is a card that can take on any legendary, almost any card, well, excluding cards like Aegis, which cannot be anti-reacted with, but most of the cards can be destroyed by Dance of Death, and it's a neutral card, so you can fit it in any kind of your deck. Obviously, you are not taking like 5 copies of it, but 1 or 2 is always fine, because that means you will be able to deal with a threat from your opponent. Not always you are able to produce your own creatures, so assuming you didn't get lucky and you get poor golds and your opponent got lucky and got some nice legendaries, still Dance of Death will kill it. But the other thing is drafting creatures with enter the battlefield effect, so in Shadowverse it's a fanfare. Because the reason is, when you play this creature, the effect is done immediately. So you play it, effect is done, and the creature already pays off for itself. So a lot of creatures with fanfare are good. On the other hand, creatures with clash are not quite good unless you are evolving them right away and using clash. Because if you play a creature with clash, you still give 1 turn to your opponent, so he can use removal, for example, remove it from the board, and the clash will do nothing at all. So picking stuff with clash is always a risk, while picking stuff with fanfare means you are always getting the effect on your turn. And that's the other part of the online card games, because in physical, like Magic the Gathering, you can do stuff during your opponent's turn, while in Shadowverse, in this game, it's impossible to do stuff during your opponent's turn. Like, you cannot interrupt any player, so when it's your turn, you're free to do whatever you want. The only stuff that can do it is some sort of amulets or creatures that do something when they die, so that's how your opponent can interrupt your turn. But other than that, you decide how you want to attack and what do you want to kill, and in which direction your creatures go. So are you trading your creatures with your opponent creatures, or are you going face? and that comes very handy on rank 2. So if you are a player number 1 versus player number 2, player number 1 have this inherited advantage, assuming you play the very same deck. If you play a creature on 1 and your opponent plays a creature on 1, and then you play a creature on 2 and your opponent play a creature on 2, both of you have 2 creatures, but you are still 1 turn ahead all of the time, and you are the one who can attack your opponent before he can attack you. So you are just getting tempo advantage. And the same goes for Arena. On Arena, sometimes it's fine to be a second, but only when you have really powerful evolutions. So that's the other thing. If you have a lot of powerful evolutions in your deck, like you manage to draft them, then you have to make a choice every time you want to evolve something. Do you want to evolve a basic creature just to get rid of your opponent creature, or do you want to wait some time and evolve a premium one? So get a premium evolution, and that's important. And overall, there is no set guideline for the take two, because it's random. It's random as one can be. It always presents with random cards, and you're always choosing one of the two pairs. But the thing that can minimize the slack a little is picking two mediocre cards is better than picking one really good card and one terrible card most of the time. Depends on how you build your deck and how bad the card that would be. For example, what is it called? Valkyrie Spiria, I believe it's Valkyrie Spiria, 2 mana card that will give +1/+0 to neutral follower. This card is really bad on Arena, and most of the time you can treat it as a dead card. Same goes for the cards like Spellbook Decryption. 6 mana, draw 3 cards. It's usually not worth it to get it. Of course, if you got one, fine, but if you got more than that, it's only useful in the late game where both of you and your opponent run out of fuel. You have no cards in hand, he have no cards in hand, and you both got no board. But if you draw multiple copies of cards that you can't cast, you will be stuck, and that's the worst that can happen. So that's why your goal is to take a lot of 2-drops, a lot of 3-drops, some 4-drops, some 5-drops, some 6-drops. So you will be able to play card every turn, and that way you are not falling behind on the tempo. Not playing a card on your turn means you are falling behind. And the other thing on Arena is using your mana efficiently, so try to spend all of your play points with every turn. So if you are able to play a card, for example, that costs 3 on the turn 4, or you can play 2 cards that cost 2, most of the time it's better to play 2 cards that cost 2, so you are not wasting any play point and you are using it efficiently. So that would probably be it about the take two, unless you want to expand on some aspect of Arena.
No, not really. I've just I've hadn't the chance to actually like try it out. I mean, I've played like with one ticket one time, and got like 05. It was like back when I was just starting to play, and I thought I'll probably just return to it when I'm when I'm a little bit more like knowledgeable about the game and how the cards interact with each other and how they work, how the game works and stuff like that. So yeah, your answer was like a big help, I think. I mean, at least now I have general understanding of how it works and what I should generally go for, like what cards to pick, what cards not to pick, and what to look out for and stuff like that. So yeah, that was helpful. Thanks.
Okay, great. So then, the question number 2: any tips about liquifying cards, general rules, guide, services? So that's one of the tricky ones, because about that card that you can liquefy with every expansion. So for example, we just had expansion 5 days ago or a week ago, considering it was released just now. People will build new decks, and it's usually taking around 2 to 3 weeks to build new decks optimally to make use of all of cards. Because in Shadowverse there is this nerf and buff cycle, so every month they are nerfing some cards and they are buffing some cards. So every month there will be new decks that will shine, and there will be decks that will fall out of favor because of nerfs. So if some cards will get nerfed, then the deck won't be as powerful as it used to be. For example, they just nerfed Alice and Lion of the Golden City, and all of a sudden neutral decks are not so powerful. They were really powerful before the expansion hit. Now after nerf of the Alice, they are not. Okay, wait a second. Sorry for that. Thanks. As for the liquefying, there are some guides in the internet that you can refer to. So you can go and check if the card is played in some decks, if it's used in a lot of builds. But usually liquefying legendaries, unless the legendary is not used in any deck, it's probably worth to keep it. So if it's not used anywhere, then feel free to liquefy it. If it's used in some sort of deck that have some success, then yeah, just keep it. As for gold, silvers, and bronzes, there are common places, some charts where you can check. But as for bronze and silvers, because you just started playing the game, then unless you are spending a lot of money to buy packs, I don't know if you are or not, then foil cards are cards that give you a lot of vials. So if you are liquefying foil cards, unless you really like them, it's still better to, if you have normal copies and foil copies, it's better to just liquefy foil copies and play with normal ones. So that will allow you to expand your collection much faster, and you will be able to build more decks. So more decks means you will be able to go competitive faster too, because in tournaments they require 2 to 3 decks, sometimes 4 decks, and well, 4 decks for full decks. That's a lot of vials. So to achieve that while we were only playing Blood won't be an easy task right now. So it's not gonna be fast, but if you just keep to some rules, so disenchant the cards that are not played, disenchant foil cards if you have normal versions, then it's not gonna be so hard in the long run. That would go for this. And for the services, you probably know the most popular pages. So there is Reddit, Shadowverse, there is GamePress, there is Game AI, there is what was it called? There is Bagom, obviously. So on all of these sites you can find either articles or deck list, or just lists of cards that are not useful. So feel free to just search on them, and that will help you with liquefying. Because there is no rule of thumb, there is not something, unless the legendary is really trash, there is nothing that can guarantee that it won't be trash in the next expansion. For example, right now, Lord Atomy was considered really bad before the expansion, and it wasn't considered a real card. It was mostly as a meme card, and people would easily liquefy him. Right now, decks with Lord Atomy placed high in JCG tournaments, so that's probably the most competitive environment. So if you want to refer to some decks, then they have all of this deck list on Bagum. So sv.bagum.com, it's probably the site, but I suppose you know it already.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I've heard of it.
So they have all of the deck list from JCGs, they collect them, and that's probably the best reference for the tournament play. Obviously, not everything that will work in tournaments will work on ladder. So for ladder, of course it's not easy, but you have to find Twitter of the players. So for example, on the Game AI page, a lot of articles, they are in Japanese. I don't know if you know Japanese or not. So
No, not really.
okay, so even if you don't, then if you go to the tier list there, you can always see the deck by the images, because they have decks in image versions, and it's not that hard to recognize the cards. But more importantly, they got the links to the Twitters of the players. So there is a lot of players that post their decks on Twitter from their ladder play, and it's a really good base to find the deck you desire that will work. that's one. And what was it? Oh, I know, a mana search. There's also a mana search page, and they also have some sort of tier list on their page with some sample decks. So that's the other site that you can go and refer to. And the other thing is, if you don't have all of these links compiled, I have old version, so I will send you right now on Discord. It's not new, so some of links are not up to date, but most of them are. So you can check it out, and then you will have a lot of links in one place for your own use. I plan to update it one day, but maybe during the weekend. Right now, I have a lot of other stuff to do, so. I can just go free and update them. There is also one link to the cards that might be liquefied, but once again, that one is a little outdated. But the links to the pages should be totally fine, and they should work. So you can use it as a reference. Okay, let me see the questions once again. Okay, so like I said, you're primarily interested in Blood Forest, Dragon Sword, interested in Shadow. So when it comes to just all classes, that also depends on your cards. So if you don't have cards for a class, so you're lacking vials to make a full deck, then it's probably better to wait until you collect the vials and make a full deck. Because if you are not playing a full deck, you are playing with replacements, the deck will not work out like it's supposed to be, so you will lose a lot of games, not because of lack of skill or because of something, but just because you have replacements. So there are stuff that cannot be replaced, and yeah, you are just on your own to collect cards, and when you collect cards, you can build decks. Well, that's how it goes in card games, in collectible ones. Open more packs, get more cards, and that will be it. So I guess that would close the question number 2, unless once again you want to expound something.
No, it's totally fine.
And now that I see the question number 3 is also a little bit tied to it. As for variety of cards and what packs should you buy, a lot of cards that are used in decks are from new expansions. So new expansion is always a good buy. Especially after the release. On the other hand, a lot of cards that are useful in decks you can find in standard, so basic packs. And basic packs are also a good way to spend your vials. Darkness Evolved has probably the least amount of useful cards out of all of the expansions, so don't buy Darkness Evolved. It's just better to buy other packs and use your vials to craft cards from Darkness Evolved than to buy them. Like, Darkness Evolved had a lot of really trash legendaries that are not used anywhere, a lot of really bad golds, so even if you get lucky and open some legendaries from Darkness Evolved, the chances are it's still gonna be a trash one and you won't be able to use it efficiently. As for other good pack, Tempest of the Gods and Rise of Bahamut, they are both fine, so there is a lot of fine legendaries, same goes for the Wonderland Dreams. So all of the expansions besides Darkness Evolved are good, but if you want to focus on something, then Starforge Legends right now is probably the way to go, because most of the decks obviously require some cards from it. So let's see, Blood, there goes Medusa from Blood. For Forest, we got Cassiopeia, we got Elephant in some versions. We also have some new gold stuff. For Dragon, we have Prime Dragon Keeper. And all in all, you're still gonna spend most of your vials crafting the cards instead of opening them in packs. Like, if you open the card that you need in pack, perfect, then you got lucky. But the harsh reality in card games, in online card games, is that you are not bound to open the cards you want. You simply open the cards you don't want, then you vial them, and then you create the ones. So that's just all to luck, and if you're opening boosters with a lot of luck, well, that's nothing. There is nothing that can influence it besides the random factor. So you can't do anything about it, but just sum it up, don't buy Darkness Evolved because it's not needed. It's just really a bad expansion. Obviously, there are some core cards from Darkness Evolved that are playing in decks, so I believe the Time War Mage Levi was from Darkness Evolved, and this is the card that play in almost every rune deck, 3 copies, because it's super powerful. 2 mana, 2/2. You probably know the card. Evolve, give you a Crimson Sorcery into your hand.
Yes.
Okay, so
I've seen him a lot.
yeah, because he is really versatile and good. But then again, if you are gonna play Rune, it's better to just craft him instead of trying to open him in your packs. The pre-built decks are also really fine way, especially the new ones. So they just give you a baseline of cards. So some useful gourds, some useful silvers, and legendaries to some extent. That depends on the deck. So for Dragon pre-build we got Sibyl of the Waterworm, the one from the new pre-build from Tempest of the Gods. We got Sibyl, the Waterworm. For Shadow we got Neptis, I believe, and Dektar. For Sword we got Albert. So these are all of the useful cards. Like obviously that's only one copy of the legendary, but I already saw you got a Belphegor, so you know how this pre-build works, I guess. So they give you a lot of good base cards, and it makes your investments into the deck faster. Question number 4: how often does meta change? So that's an easy one.
Kind of answered the question already, like about when you were answering like the first question. You've mentioned that every month some cards are buffed, some cards are nerfed, and
yeah, that's totally true, but I can also expand on it. So because there is this cycle, thanks to this nerf and buff cycle, so when the cards get changed, there is 1 month period within people will try to do index, especially right now because there is a new expansion. So the first month of a new expansion is still a fresh grant, so expect a lot of decks to pop out next week, in the 2 weeks, in the 3 weeks, and during the course of entire one. But as for generic month, so assuming middle of expansion, so month number 2 or month number 3, so that's what are we gonna see in November and December. After nerfs and buffs are made, the first week people are gonna experiment, so that's why the metagame is shaking on the first week. On the second week, people will try, and there will be a lot of tournaments. Like there's a lot of tournaments anyway every week, but people will copy and paste decks from the tournaments that happened in the week 1. So the week 2 is gonna be ladder is gonna be flooded with decks from tournaments that were copied. While the people who created them will still try to refine them. And obviously the week 3 and 4, these are the weeks where the meta is usually settled and you can already expect nothing new. So you'll be played versus all the decks you know and all the stuff you know. So right now we are in week 1 of expansion, so there is still a lot of things that might change. Next week also the things will change accordingly to how the tournament's results are. Because if there is a S-tier deck, then the people will try to counter the S-tier deck, and if they find the counter to S-tier deck, then people will try to counter the counter, and the cycle goes on and goes on. So in week 3 and 4, it's probably safe to assume that the decks that are built will be fine. So there is still some time, and right now meta is still shaping. That's fine. Like, that's okay because there is no stagnations. But right now we can already notice that the Aggro Sword, Prime Dragon Keeper deck, and some Runecrafts, some Forest Crafts. These are the decks that people are experimenting on ladder. And if you played some games this week, you probably noticed that there is a lot of swords and a lot of dragons.
Yes, definitely did.
Okay, so that would be the meta. The other question 5: should you strive to be alright at every class, pick a couple and try to be good at this 2-3? So, if you plan on taking on tournaments, you have to master, maybe not master, you have to learn at least 2-3 classes, depends on what kind of tournaments they are. So if it's a series of tournaments with 3 classes, then you have to have not only deck, but also at least some knowledge about your decks, because if you copy-paste the deck, sure, the deck will be fine, but if you have no idea how it would work, then obviously it's gonna turn bad, so you need to play some games with any given deck. And it's about striving to be alright at every class. That's something that can be done. And it's not wrong. But for starters, it's still better to master one class. So you are playing Blood. and that's totally fine. So you learned one class, you learn its strength and weaknesses, because if you are mediocre with every class, it's not gonna take you anywhere. So it's better to be master in one class and then just good with others than be really average with all of them. You have to have your strong point. So, for example, in tournaments, you just want to have a deck that you are sure that you will know what to do. Same goes for ladder. If you want to grind points, you need to play a deck that you know. So you need to know what to do with it, how to play it, and have an answer to every situation. Because if you play a deck a lot, then even if you're in something, in a situation where your opponent plays weird deck, so you are playing in a ladder and your opponent plays some cards that you see for the first time, and he's playing the deck that you see for the first time, you are still able to think about a plan, because you know the extensions of your deck, what your deck do, and how are you gonna deal with a new threat. While if you're playing a new deck, a new class, and learning it, there might be things that you won't think about for starters, and the turn time is limited. So, like I said, it's better to learn one class, like Master than slowly expand to every other, than to learn everything at once. It's just not gonna work out. And you can see the same similarities with a lot of games and a lot of stuff. For example, you said you played Overwatch, you played Dota. It's probably better to master one hero or one type of heroes at first to be good at, to have something that you can rank at, than just try new hero every game and then try to do something with it. It's just not gonna work out unless you are excellent and you can fit with anything that you are presented with. But that's not the common trait among people, so no one is expecting everyone to be master with every hero, every class, especially in MOBA games. So in Dota, right now, there is, over 100 heroes? I believe 130. I don't know how much, but a lot, right?
I've stopped, I've like dropped it about 2 years ago, so I'm not actually aware anymore. I think about like 5 characters were released after I already dropped the game, so...
Sure, but, well, we can say that there is a lot of them.
Yeah, like about 100, I guess.
Yeah, so that will be true. So if someone new is coming to the game, he's not gonna try every new hero every game and try to be good. He's gonna spam one hero every game and then be proficient with it and then expand to new ones. So that's how the MOBA goes. So I believe that would close the number 5. Okay, and the number 6. So number 6 have also this question about learning deck building. So I expanded on it already in the beginning. So I guess there is nothing to add about deck building. Well, it's simple. There is no best way to learn deck building. To learn deck building, you have to learn the game. You have to know all of the cards. You have to know the meta game, and there is no shortcut to it. So there is not something like, I want to learn deck building. Cool, but there is no such a way as learning deck building. You have to learn the game, and then you will learn it eventually if you commit to it. And as self-education on the subject of the game, so there is a lot of things that can be done. Obviously, playing the game can take you so far. So if you play the game and, well, just spam ladder, you will eventually learn a lot from your own mistakes, but you have to revise them. So if you play on ladder, it is fine if you do some time and go over your replays. If you are not sure if this move was correct or not, like you are present with 2 choices on a given turn and you are not sure if the move you did was good, then you simply can go launch up a replay and revise the game over from the scratch. You can pause on the turn, because on replays you can pause. I don't know if you used replay feature or not yet.
Replays, I've used it like a couple times when I wasn't sure what happened. Like there were a couple games when I died and didn't understand why.
Okay.
So I had to watch the replay so that I would see what had transpired. So yeah, I've used it a couple times.
Okay, so you know how it works. So that's a really good thing that we have replays in this game. Like there is no replay in Hearthstone, for example. That's a pity. There's outside source that can, but well, Hearthstone is so big that someone would expect the game have it, but well, it doesn't exist. So in Shadowverse, when you are not sure, you can just go to replays, pause the turn, and you have all the time of the world to think about what could be done better. Like if I made a play differently, what could happen, or would you win? Or you can see if you missed lethal or not. With some decks, there will be situation where you would be able to miss lethal. Well, it happens to everyone in every rank, so people will miss lethal from time to time. So on replay, you can freely analyze all of the stuff that happens, and it's gonna help. It's really gonna help you, because if you spam a lot of games, play a lot of games, and don't watch replays, then if you make a mistake and don't recognize it as mistake, so for example, you will repeat the wrong thing over and over again, then it's not gonna come to fruition. While if you go and check on replay and realize, I made a mistake there, I'm not gonna do it anymore, then you will improve. So everything that can help you improve, little by little, even if it's 1%, 2%, that still means over the course of 100 games, you will win 1 game, 2 games more, and over 1,000 of games, it's gonna be 10, 20, and such. And all of these small numbers are adding up, and they're helping you ladder efficiently and get a lot of points. Like Shadowverse is really grindy game. You need enormous amounts of games to get to master, then a lot of games to get to grandmaster, and just a lot of games to gain points. That's not an easy task, and it requires a lot of time and obviously a lot of commitment to ladder. So just using your time to watch replays is good, because it will just make you win more. And the other thing is reading articles. So they're not necessarily have to be Shadowverse articles, because the thing about Shadowverse articles is unless you can read Japanese, there is a limited amount of them in English, and there is not a lot of good ones in English, but you can read a lot of generic articles of the similar games. So as a prime example, Hearthstone is probably it is the biggest collectible card game, and obviously a lot of articles are pinpointing some situations, but some of them will just explain how the tempo works, how the aggro works, how the combo control works, and all of these aspects can be transitioned to the Shadowverse. So you can find some articles in other card games, or just a generic knowledge. So about tilt, about not being a scrap, because there is such thing as scrap mentality in card games. People will be like, I'm not gonna play the deck because I don't like it, I'm not gonna play the deck because the deck is cheap, or the deck is just aggro, I don't like aggro. While in reality, if you want to achieve success and win as much as possible, you just cannot block yourself by not playing any given deck. So if your goal is to win, because some people have a goal, I just want to play a game, I just want to play with my class, or I just want to have fun, then it's perfectly fine. But if someone's goal is, I want to win as much as possible, then they just cannot refuse to play the best deck, because obviously the best deck is giving you the best chances of getting as much wins as possible. So mental blocks are a thing in card games, but it's easy to get rid of them, so that's not a problem. So I assume you didn't read the Play to Win book yet, if you didn't play a lot of card games, or maybe you saw it in some. Well, maybe you saw it in the past, because the book is like over 15 years old. It was online and physical, and it was used for a lot of games, just in general, so competitive. So maybe you know it from your Dota times or from Overwatch. I don't know.
I think I've heard about it. Who's the author though?
I will send you a link right now. It's on Sterling.net, and if you didn't, then it would be good to read it. I mean, no one is telling you to read it right now or read it overnight, but even if you read like one chapter per day, or even one chapter per week, and try to understand the knowledge that's there, it will help you with approach, with mentality. Because this book is old, and these articles are old, and most of them are comparing stuff to the fighting games, so to the Street Fighter, but these are all the things that can be transitioned to almost any game that people are playing competitively right now, so it's timeless. The things that are included there also make some reference to Art of War of Sun Tzu, so that's the book well, everyone heard about it.
Yes.
So that's good, and it's really good in straightening a mindset. So what should you think about when you go and play in ladder? How should you approach any given deck or any given situation? Approach for the tournaments, because tournaments are just different part of the story, and they can exhaust you not only physically but also mentally. So there is explanation why in tournaments sometimes it's better to play not because on ladder, if you want to win as much as possible, it's perfect to play the best deck. But in tournaments, it's not always wise to play the best deck for ladder. So tournaments including teching, includes mastering of your deck list, of your classes, and it's all explained there. So it's a really fine piece of artwork, and I really do recommend checking it out. It's just really helpful. So yeah, that would be about it. About self-education. So once again, you can read articles that are generic about cards and mentality, and then you can transition them over. About specific deck list, you can watch some streamers or you can watch some YouTube videos, and it's perfectly fine. But the thing about streamers and YouTubers is most of them are fine, but they are not perfect. I mean, of course, a lot of them will be brilliant players, but a lot of them will be just community creators. So community creator doesn't exactly mean they will be excellent players or they will know what they are talking about. They might be like, oh, I created this deck and I think it's cool and I will tell you how to play this deck. And they will just play the deck and that's it. So that's a pity that there is not a lot of non-Japanese players that stream and explain their moves thoroughly. But still, even if you don't understand the language, you can turn out the Japanese players with a lot of Grandmaster points, because that's probably the best source of good players, after all, and just check what deck they are playing, and how they are doing their moves, because images are still fine. Like, you can see the image of the card and know what this card does if you learn the game. So eventually you will know what every card in the game does just by seeing the picture, not by seeing the name, because names will be in Japanese after all. So that would be probably the closer on the question number 6, I guess. Or you want to add something?
No, it's fine.
Okay, and then 7, only aggro on ladder, going face, what's your strategy and tactics? So as for risky decisions relying on the possibility that your opponent will have a lethal, that's perfectly fine for ladder, because there are two play styles that you can approach, and there is this play to win and play to not lose, because not losing doesn't necessarily mean you are winning. It simply means not losing. So there's a difference between win and not lose, and that's how you should approach these things. So if you go for the all-in play, that means I assume that means you're guaranteed that if your opponent doesn't have an answer, you're gonna win the game. So you're present with 2 moves. One of them is risky play, so if your opponent do not have a card, then you're gonna win out of the spot. But if he got the card, then well, you're gonna lose the game. The other one is the safe play, but the safe play also includes a lot of risk. So the safe play means you're not gonna win on the next turn, but you're also not gonna lose. And you're relying on the power of top decks. So you're relying that you will be able to draw something, or your opponent won't be able to deal with the situation, but it's not guaranteed to give you an option to kill your opponent if he doesn't find an answer. So that's a pretty nice tactic for tournaments. So in tournaments, most of the time people will try to do safe plays, because in tournaments most of them are single elimination. So if you make a mistake and you lose, then you're out. You're not given a second chance, unless it's a double elimination tournament. So in double elimination that goes differently, but assuming it's a generic single elimination tournament, people just don't want to risk it so much, unless it's the only option. So if there is a safe play in tournament, they will most of the time choose a safe play and try to green the games like that. While on ladder, you are playing multiple games on ladder per day or per week. I don't know how often you play and how much time you are spending Shadowverse, but assuming generic player, he's gonna play, I don't know, a lot of games during a week. So even if you play like 5 games per day, that's 25 games per week. Okay, let's make it twice, so let's assume even 50 games per week. It's still a lot of games, so even if you make a risky play in one game, it will only matter in one of them, so that's 2% of your entire ladder play. And by doing risky moves, you're learning the extensions of what to do, and that is easily comparable to Dota. So in Dota and all of the MOBAs, you have 2 choices when you are present with some situations that you are uncomfortable with. So you can just do your stuff. So for example, if you have experience with one hero, you can do and farm or deny, or just safely roam on the map, help others, and not involve yourself in team fights. Just make sure that you don't die and that you're not gonna be liability to your team. Or you might make a risky move, so you might risk some stuff and try to make a flashy move, or try to kill your opponent, or try to commit to a move that if you fail, then you are in a terrible position, but if it does succeed, then you will be in a really good one. So the same can be said about Overwatch and ultimates. Sometimes you are forced to do a risky ultimate that if it will work out, then well, your team is gonna win, or go with a package, or take control over the area. While if it will fail, well, then it will fail and it's over. So risk is always involved, but taking risk will allow you to understand what to do. Because if you don't take risk, then the next moment you are present with the very same situation, and you won't take the risk again, and then you won't take the risk again. You don't know the capabilities of what you can do, and that is simply putting you in a disadvantage. So if you take the risk once, and then the next time you're present with the very same situation, you will at least know one of the outcomes, like what can happen when you risk the move or when you risk committing to something, and it will be easier for you to calculate, like is it worth it or is it not worth it, or how should you approach the situation. So on ladder, once again, it's perfectly fine to do a risky moves, because then you're calculating, like I can win if I top deck this and this and this, if I do this and this move. And on the other hand, you can do a play like I can't win, but I'm not gonna lose. So that's just not how you should play ladder. Sometimes you are forced to do so, but going for all-in moves, especially with aggro decks, like you explained, is a very good tactic. You can go and play with mentality to not lose, with a lot of control or mid-range decks. And that's fine because they have tools to recover, while aggro decks in Shadowverse and in most of the card games are playing against the clock. And that's the other idea. So playing around the clock and with the clock, that's a concept that involves a lot of aggro decks. And the reason is, aggro decks usually include cheap cards. So cheap cards doesn't have powerful effects. Like the card for 1 mana cannot have the very same effect as legendary for 10 mana, for example. Like you cannot compare a Quick Blader 1 mana 1/1 with Storm to the Bahamut, who is 10 mana, destroy everything and be extremely big dude on the board, or to a Zeus 5/10 with Storm, Ward, Bane, like everything. So obviously cheaper creatures won't have as powerful effects as the more expensive ones. And then if the games go to the late games, because in this game it's not like Magic the Gathering where players have to draw their lands. In Shadowverse, every turn you are getting additional play point, unless it's a Dragoncraft, but Dragoncraft is the only exception, so discounting Dragoncraft. Every turn, every player will gain +1 play point. So if your deck includes a lot of cheap stuff, eventually, if the game drags to the late game, and it's not something that you should aim for with aggro decks. With aggro decks, you obviously want to finish the game as fast as possible. But when you are playing with midrange or playing control, You're perfectly fine with not winning in the early game because you have a lot of expensive cards and cards with powerful effects, and you can win anytime. So the game can go for 10 turns, it can go for 15 turns, 20 turns, and you will still be able to finish the game. You will play your threats, play your creatures, and they have reasonable bodies, they have reasonable effects, they allow you to survive for long, and then you can finish the game. While with aggro, if you run out of fuel and it's a late game, then every card of your opponent will outvalue your cards. So you play card for 2 mana, for example 2 and 2 with aggro, let's say aggro blood. You will top deck Vanya Vampire Princess for 2 mana, you will play her on board and that's it. And meanwhile your opponent will play something extremely good for 8 mana, 9 mana, 10 mana. So that's what means getting outvalued. And if you take a risky place with aggro decks, the chances are you will finish the game faster. So that's the other thing. You are just not giving your opponent time to recover. You are not giving him time to outvalue you, and that only exists with the aggro decks. On the other hand, if it's approach of the midrange and control, they can just steadily stay their ground. They can remove your threats, and they can kill you anytime they want. Because they have more expensive creatures, they have bigger creatures, and for example, creature that's 5/5 can kill you in 4 turns, while if you top deck a creature that's 2 and 2, then can kill opponent during the course of 10 turns. So yeah, that's simply it. So obviously it depends on the deck you are playing, but when it comes to aggro, then going all-in is one of the options. And it's okay. Obviously, there will be situations where going all-in is not quite good, but that's the thing that you will eventually learn when you play a lot of decks. So, because you played a lot of Blood, and I can see you had like, 200 wins with Blood, around that, you probably already know some situations in which it's worth to go face, in which it's worth to preserve your power, or play safe, or play risk, according to the top decks and card that you have in deck. So you probably already have this knowledge with Blood, and then you will have to learn this over and over with every class you are gonna pick with. So every new class you're gonna repeat the same pattern and then learn from it.
Okay.
Okay, so I suppose that would cover all of the questions that you sent me before. As for the decklist, I mean, I can go over them, like the decks that you send me, but probably the best idea will be to just copy and paste them from the internet. But for the first glance that I can tell you about these decks, so Forest, Aggro Forest is fine. It's a really cheap deck and it will work from time to time. It's not terrible. It's just okay. But it can get outvalue but a lot of stuff. So Aggro Blood that you have is most likely better. As for this iteration of Aggro Sword is not good. Because double runtable assembly, sure, it gives you consistency, but on the other hand, it gives you possibility of a dead row. Right now, there is a huge debate about how many runtable assembly you should include in your deck, but it goes like this. If you draw 2 Princess Juliet, even the 1 copy is terrible, because then you are not able to summon 2 of them. And if you draw double runtable assembly, then you have dead cards. And that's totally not what you want to include in your deck. You want to have as low amount of dead cards as possible. So as for Sword, I can send you my recommendation. As for Atomy, Atomy Shadow, it's okay. I mean, it doesn't necessarily the best deck, it doesn't necessarily the worst deck, because it performed a little. So it's okay to play it on ranked, but I don't know, it's not the fastest deck, and this deck can break a lot. So breaking simply means drawing a cards that have no synergy with each other and do nothing on their own. So that can happen. If you don't draw Atomy, then you're just running a bunch of low-cost creatures that have no impact on the game, and you are not an aggro deck, so you're not able to finish your opponent fast. So Atomy is perfectly fine to play and have fun with, but for ladder play, it might be too inconsistent. Prime Dragon Keeper with Jabberwock, so that looks like iteration from the very beginning, so from the first days. Right now, a lot of people disregarded Jabberwock, and then they play Blazing Breath to counter aggro swords, and then they play Stargaze to Heaven, the 1 mana amulet that draws you some cards. So these are the two changes that people made. Some of them do not even include Genesis Dragon, some of them includes Bahamut, some of them include Zeuses. So there is a lot of things that vary, but one thing is sure, because aggro sword growing power over the couple of days, and there is way more aggro swords, for example, right now, today or yesterday, than it was on the day 1 on the expansion. The Dragon deck had to adapt, so Blazing Breath are usually included in this one. And as for the last one, OTK Roach, so this deck is just fine. Like, OTK Roach was almost always a good deck. Sometimes it was really good, sometimes it was really bad in terms to meta, so this deck changes accordingly to meta, but the finishing blow still includes the same. So you want to amass your 0 mana creatures and then combo with Rhinoceros Roach and finish off your opponent on the 1 turn. The only problem of the Roach and just Forest is sometimes you won't be able to fend off aggro, so aggro sword still might finish you off before you are able to finish it, because the OTK Roach usually goes off on the turn 7, so you can go with 0 creature, Rhinoceros Roach, and then bounce it back and play both Rhinoceros Roaches, so that includes 2 Roaches and 1 bounce effect, and that's 7 mana. After you got your 3 creatures with Fina and 11 Princess Mage. So turn 7 might still be too late. So that's the one problem of it. But on the other hand, versus some slower decks, you are perfectly fine, and it's just okay deck. It's not that like top tier, so I wouldn't say that's the best deck, because the best decks right now, like 100%, if you were to play the best deck, that would be Sword or Dragon. So both of them are very similar when it comes to power. Midrange Shadow also is a really good deck, because Ektar is still a beast, and just the midrange creatures of Shadow with the new additions. So Series of the Night is able to get a good value versus aggro. Dark Blade Fiend, no, not Dark Blade Fiend. 5 mana, 3 and 5 creature, new creature with ward that at the end of the turn uses 2 necromancy to shoot 2 into random opponent's creature. So that's the other new card, and they just helped Shadow to grow in power. So Shadow is also the other big contender right there. And then that would be Forest. Like, I wouldn't place Forest above any of these decks. It's definitely below them at the moment, but it will change according to the meta. So it might be better or not. And as for Blood, there is a lot of options for building Blood right now. I will check out. Can you show me your version? Like, open it on the screen and send me the code, so I can take a look on what. Sure. So I can take a look on what kind of Blood you are playing right now. And there is 2 schools at the moment. That's how I would say it. So some people are playing with Trial of the Gorgons, and some are sticking to more old school version. So with the only addition being Medusiana. So I see you have Blood that's some sort of combination of vengeance effects and getting value out of it. So this is the problem. Like, it might be a problem if you play with this deck right now when you play versus Sword. So depending on how many swords you play, you're gonna play, then you might have bad time. It might be fine versus Prime Dragon Keeper decks, it might be fine versus some other decks, but because Sword is so huge on ladder right now, it might not work out, because if you cast Blood Pact, or if you cast Rosary Claw, you're losing life. Blood Wolf, you're losing life. Belphegor, you are willingly going down to 10, so you are not able to raise him, and you have 3 Emeraldas, so every Emeralda costs 7 mana, and for 7 mana, sure, you can destroy something and attack something, but you are not able to close the game. So that's one thing. The other thing is you have Cursebrand Vampire, and because you have so many aggro openers, it's probably fine, but in a lot of builds, just remember that people are including Goblin for a reason. So a lot of people were including Goblin, and it might look awkward to play Goblin, which is just a 1-2, and Vampire is a 1-2 that can be a 2 and 3, but that simply means the Baphomet pools will be better, because Goblin is neutral, and with Baphomet, you'd rather take something that you need. So with Baphomet, you want Dark General, Belphegor, Scarlet, sometimes Emeralda. But I see that's the kind of deck that you have right now. The other example is Agroblood. So I can send you Agroblood list that I can recommend that will work right now, and then I can send you a list that people are also using. So that would be it. So wait a second. I have to open it. In the background, I forgot where it was. It was probably on the mana search. So. Okay, got it, and there is a Starforged entirely. So on Mana Surge there is Trial of the Gorgons version included, and it's one of them, and the other is the one I was using, and it's still fine. So the first one is this one. I sent it to you on Discord, and the other one is this one. So these are basically two versions of the, well, almost the same deck. So both of them are a little bit different. My version includes consistency a lot, while the Mana Search is also making sure that you get hit in your face a lot. So Sterling Chase and Bloodfed Flowerbed. All of this, like the one thing is really similar over them. So the Venom Fang Medusa is the very same card in them. So all of them play 3 copies, and the Karabos Wicked Fairy. So that's the really different version versus the Blood you were playing. So that's like a pure aggro Blood, both of them. And the thing is, the one that I send it like the mine. As you can see, there is 40 cards in any given deck, and this one got only one card that's a single copy, and the other 39 are only 13 cards. So we can 13 cards, and all of them are with 3 copies. So that's the good thing about aggro deck. That's the consistency. Some control decks or some mid-range decks will have some single cards, or they will have some finishers that are not used in triple copies, while if your entire deck is build of triple copies, then you are sure that for every turn you should be able to get a perfect mana curve. So get your 1-drop, get your 2-drop, get your 3-drop, and go on and go on. And if your opponent bricks, so if he plays a deck that's inconsistent and doesn't include playing a lot of stuff for different costs of mana, and the prime example might be the OTK Roach, like the last one that you sent with Cassiopeias. This deck have a lot of cards that early game, either they are not working with the other cards. So for example, you have cards for the turn 1, but you are not gonna use Airborne Barrage turn 1. You cannot use what was it called, Natural Guidance turn 1. Like these are the cards that you cannot use on turn 1. On the turn 2 there is also some cards like you're not gonna play Roach on the turn 2 and attack your opponent for 1. That's not a possibility. So Forest have a lot of possibilities to brick, and it's prone to die versus hyper aggressive decks. While with Blood, all of your cards have the very same goal, and that's the other thing about the aggro decks. And so Aggro Sword right now and Aggro Blood, all of your cards have the very same purpose. Either they are creatures, so the Blood is still a little bit different, but I will go first in Blood and then with Sword. So for Blood, with Blood, either all of your cards are creatures that have some positive effects. So Ambling Crave is dealing 1 damage to your opponent. Keresbrand Vampire, that's only there for the effect. Blood Wolf, attacking face. Vampire Princess, attacking face and dealing damage with the Bloodkins. Urius Levin Duke, dealing damage. Razori Claw, dealing damage. Vade Vampire Noble, protecting you a little, but also spawning creatures, so it will spawn some forest bats. And with Vampire Princess, it will deal damage. Nighthor, dealing damage and expanding your board at the same time. Venom Fang Medusa, expanding your board. Angel of the World, trying to shoot something or deal 1 damage. Dance of Death, dealing damage and removing something. And Karabos, most likely dealing damage, drawing you some cards, so that's card advantage. And with Evo Point, also dealing with something. So all of your cards serve a similar purpose, while in the Forest, you have some cards that have to be combined with others. So you have to have Amulet or a creature to back it off with the Airborne Barrage. You have to get a creature to use Natural Guidance to draw a card. For a Green Screen Protection, to buff a creature, you have to have creature on the board. So all of them are not working perfectly with each other. For example, for Cassiopeia, you require to have cards in your hand, but not only that, you require your opponent to have creatures in his board. That's the other thing. So, as you can see, you probably met a Runecraft, that's Dimension Shift Runecraft, the one that takes 3 turns. So, versus
Yes.
Runecraft, that does stuff like that, just cast spell and goes on to get additional 3 turn. Cassiopeia does nothing. It's a 6 mana 3/3 creatures, because Dimension Shift might as well not play creatures, it might just play spells and spell boost, and that's it. Play spells, remove your stuff. So Sword have a lot of situational cards, while Blood is aiming to get the same goal with most of their cards. And the sword is prime example of the deck with on the really single goal. So go face, and that's it. Currently builds of Sword includes creatures, spells that produce creatures, and that's it. So Council of Card Knights is a spell that produces 3 creatures. Round Table is finding, tutoring 2 creatures from your deck. But all in all, rest of your cards are creatures. So you are bound to play a creature every turn, and you have to use your creatures to remove your opponent's creatures or go face. And if you have the deck that have the very same goal or very similar goal with all of your cards, then bricking, so drawing a cards that doesn't serve a purpose at any given moment, is almost impossible. And these decks are perfect for climbing. While if you have Haven, if you put Haven, for example, Havencraft have a lot, and I mean a lot of cards with different purpose. So some of their cards are amulets, and some amulets will tutor another amulet. Some amulets will shoot into your opponent's creatures, so Red Hot Boots or Tarnished Grail. Some spells will remove creatures of your opponent, so Blackened Scripture, Themis Decree. Some spells will remove countdowns from your amulets, so Torrent of the Stars, Healing Prayer. Some creatures will banish creatures of your opponent, so Priest of the Cudgel and Judge of Retribution. Some creatures will be used as finishers, so Aegis. Some amulets also might win the game, so Seraph. But there are also amulets that produce creatures, so Biscolaria, March Hearty Time, Garuda, Winged Sentinel, that removes counters and shoots into your opponent's face. Minyu, that cannot be targeted. Luxwing Rhino, that deals damage to your opponent. So Haven have so much variety in their decks, then sometimes you will draw cards that are perfect versus Class A, but you are facing Class B, and you can't do anything against that, and that you are just gonna lose because your deck were inconsistent in what it plans to do and what cards you can include. So that's the prime example why consistent decks, on the long run, they will win more, because they won't break by just not drawing the piece of the puzzle they want. The only way the aggro decks at the moment can break is if you go second, because going second is a really bad thing for most of decks, and especially for aggro ones. You probably noticed that. By going first, you can win a lot more games. And if you are playing as a player number 2 and your opponent is player number 1, and he starts to play creatures 1, 2, 3, 4, it's hard to come back from it, and it would be different if you were the player number 1. But going second and drawing a lot of expensive cards from the deck. So sure, some aggro swords, some bloods will include cards. So imagine if with blood you would draw 3 Emeraldas or 3 Karabos into your starting hand. Then yeah, sometimes it is impossible to win, even if your deck have the very same goal. But it rarely happens, and over the course of the game the effect will be mitigated. So if you play enough games, for every game that you will break, there is a chance that your opponent will break too. And the same could be used, for example, Overwatch. I don't know how it works in Overwatch currently, but Dota, League of Legends. People were saying they will remember the games like, oh, I had a perfect game, but then my teammates disconnected, or my teammates troll or were intentionally feeding, and I lost the game, and they will go with this fact over and over, and they will cry. But they won't remember the situation where it was different. So they were playing, and in the enemy team there was a lever, in the enemy team there was a feeder. So that will balance out, like the chance of getting this thing, so chance of breaking, and if you play the very same deck as your opponent, the chance of breaking is the same for you and for your opponent. So that's another random factor. that the same thing can be said about draw. Like all of the card games have, well, all of the tempo-based card games that we currently have includes random draw. So you draw a card randomly from your deck, and there is nothing you can do about it. So obviously people will have better draws and will have bad draws. That will happen all the time. So that all just means you have to play enough games to mitigate the effect, so it will not matter. You just have to make more positive decisions or more victories than losses, and it will overcome the hardships with this one.
I see.
Okay, so I guess that would also go with the blood. So I'm not telling you to craft the blood list right now because I don't know how many vials you have and also how good this is gonna be. Because this week, like, there will be NGA qualifiers. So NGA is not a competitive tournament compared to JCGs, but there will be also JCGs. So when the new Japanese tournaments finishes, the people will have really refined deck lists because there will be counters to the existing decks. So this will be more polished versions than what's currently on Beigum. So if you don't have enough vials or if your card collection is small at the moment, I would suggest you to just stick to what you have right now, or just play some take-twos, or just experiment and do other things with your deck. Like, you can rebuild it if you have vials, but if you don't, then just do not. And wait until they release the deck list, and then change accordingly. Meta will change a little, but the deck list will be more polished. So you don't want to invest your vials in a deck that might look fine right now, but it will be bad in a week. So you just want to invest your vials as wise as possible when you start the game. So this is also coming to maintaining your resources. If you commit too much right now and they nerf cards at the end of the month, they will nerf something, buff something, all of a sudden it might turn out that the deck that you spent all of your vials is useless right now. And if you do not have a backup plan, then you won't have a good option to play on ladder. So always think of it as having a backup plan, but you can always, for example, spend money and buy more packs. So that's the other way of getting collection.
The tournament you mentioned, like LSG something, the Japanese one.
That's it, JCG, and I will send you a link to current
JCG.
one. Yeah, my pronunciation sucks, so that's why.
No, it's just I guess I just misheard it.
No problem.
When is it occurring? Like,
okay, so
in a couple of weeks, or
no. So I send you right now the deck list from the ones that were during the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and they usually happen during the weekends. So it should happen on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, like once again. And because people on Begum site are working, doing a really good job with collecting the decks and deck lists and such, I expect they will be as soon as on Monday. I don't know, probably on Monday we would be able to see the deck list. Unless you want to do it for yourself, so if you find a lot of Twitters from the players who play in this tournament, so a lot of Japanese players' Twitters, then if they post it, then you can find it faster. But usually it's only from the first place, second place, and such, while Bagum expand on just a lot of places. So you have a look on the great scheme of things. So these are all good deck lists that you can try on, but just you have to remember that these were made, most of them like 1 to 3 days after the expansion was released, and it's still really fresh. Like right now we have day 5, so the same amount of time passed between release of expansion and the last tournament, so October 1st, and from October 1st to October 5 right now, and the decks simply evolved. So that's why it's the best to wait until this tournament will be over and then look over things if you want to invest your vials.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. I wasn't like aware of the whole tournament thing. I mean, I've seen some decks on the game press, like with the which were like which had titles like JCG like first place or second place, but I wasn't like aware how this all worked. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Like Game Press also puts a lot of decklist on their page. It's up to preference, I must say. But the Game Press usually only posts the places number 1, 2, 3, 4. So the top 4. While on the Begum you can see, I believe, top 16 or yeah, top 16 most likely in most of the decks. So obviously, that doesn't mean that the decks in top 16 are bad, but the other things that you can take out of it is popularity. So if one deck is really popular, people will either stick to it, or they will try to find a counter. So it also gives you a really good scouting place to see which decks are doing their work really good. So, for example, you can see that there was the Path to Purgatory Sword that took 4th place in the tournament from the 1st October, but it doesn't mean that the Path to Purgatory Sword is good. That just means that one of the players succeeded in piloting it, and that's it. Because then if you try to go over all of the tournaments, you will see that's the only single one that made it. So sure, people sometimes will play weird decks and they will succeed with it, but it doesn't matter that the deck was good. It also might be element of surprise. It might be that they caught their opponent off guard, or they were extremely lucky, their opponents were extremely bad. So just don't look at the single decks, look at the grand scheme. So doing by that, you can see aggro sword. There is more aggro swords than Path to Purgatory swords, so that simply means the aggro sword is more popular and obviously better. Same goes for the dragon. There is more Prime Dragon Keeper dragon decks than the Ram Dragons. So Ram Dragons, sure, that might succeed, but in a blind, for example, blind pink, or if you had to choose one, then the Prime Dragon Keeper is still doing way better, or is more popular. But that's only comparing 5 of these tournaments. So the big one for this expansion is gonna happening this weekend. This will be the turning point of the expansion, because the decks will clarify. People will find more optimal lists, and meta will start shape up for good. So that would cover the decklist part. So I guess that will be it, unless you have any other questions for now. So I don't know, because we could go ladder and spectate, but seeing as the decks and capability, because I didn't know how many decks or how many vials you have, or what you can invest right now or not before the session. So seeing as you start the game this month, it's better to not invest into the deck before the weekend. So I'm not gonna force you to create something to go way out of your track, because it might cost you vials on the long run. So you could invest in something that won't be good. As for the other one, because there is usually 2 sessions, there is this one, because it's like this over the expansion, I suggest we can go with the other one next week, if you're up to it, if you find enough questions that you want to be answered and such. And if it was enough for this one, then yeah, we can also end on this one. So if you have any other questions for now, then feel free to ask. If not, then we can talk them other on Discord later on.
Well, I think I would love to have a session next week when as you said, the meta will be more clear, so that I would love to hear your opinion on that.
Okay.
I think this session was extremely useful to me, like extremely helpful. I mean, I've learned a lot, I feel like, and yeah, I will. It will take some time for me to process the information, and I'm like immensely grateful. It was like kind of a new experience for me. I've never tried being coached. Like, I mean, like I've never had any experience talking to people who did this coaching thing. Even back when I played like Dota, I kind of learned it all by myself or through guides on YouTube and stuff. or just read it up on the internet or through Steam guides and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, like after all, this was the goal of the program, to help people. Like, you know, obviously there is a lot of stuff that you can learn by yourself, but right now you just got the knowledge of a lot of shortcuts, so you will save your time because you're clearly right now you should know what to do. And about processing, because like I said, there was also a lot of things, like I mentioned before on Discord, you can just check it out, like it's recorded, so it's on Twitch or on Facebook, and you can go over, launch it up. So if you don't remember an answer for such question for one of them, then no problem, just feel free to go and rewind and check it out then.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. I'm glad that you learned something. So that's good. Like that's the best feeling, when the knowledge is useful. Like I can pass the knowledge and you say that it was useful, so it's fine to me. That means at least I did something right.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So like I said, we can contact each other on Discord. You got it, so feel free to send me a message when you go the first one. And yeah, if you have no other questions, then well, have a nice evening, I guess, because it's really late in your place.
Same to you.
Huh? Thanks. Okay, so see ya. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that would cover the session for now. There was no point in what do I want? There's no point in expected plate and such this time. Well, no problem. So also for all people on chat on Facebook and Twitch, well, maybe you also learned something. If you want to order a session, you can either go to the Begum University or try the Gamers or something. There is also this one. Session is covered on fan page and on Twitch, so you can check the archives on whichever service you want. So if you want to go over or try the other ones, because I did a lot of these sessions with a lot of people in Shadowverse, of course in previous meta, because this is the first one in the new meta. But if you want to learn some generic knowledge, then feel free to check them out. And for now I'm going on, so thanks a lot, and you too have a nice day, have a nice evening. See ya.